Today we're diving into 10 powerful habits that, in just 1 week, sparked incredible changes in my life. I know what you're thinking. Can such transformation happen so quickly? I wouldn't believe it either if I hadn't experienced it myself. These aren't your usual self-help tricks, but deep, practical habits that brought clarity, calm, and real growth. From struggles to breakthroughs, I've tested each one, and the impact has been life-altering. So grab a coffee, settle in, and stick around, because by the end, you'll have actionable, realistic steps that you can start today, complete with some personal stories that show just how powerful these habits can be. Let's jump in. Habit 1. Practicing daily gratitude. This habit was simple yet incredibly uplifting. Each morning I started listing 3 things I was grateful for, from big accomplishments to small moments of joy. Reflecting on the positives grounded me and shifted my focus toward abundance, making challenges feel more manageable. It's easy to get caught up in the stresses of daily life, but gratitude brings us back to what's truly important. If you're feeling overwhelmed, try writing down a few things you're thankful for each morning. You might be surprised by how much lighter and more positive it makes you feel. Habit 2. Journaling. Journaling was something I'd always thought of as just for deep thinkers, but dedicating 10 minutes each night to write about my day changed everything. I started with simple notes about what made me happy, what I struggled with, and soon it became a space for real self-reflection. The habit revealed patterns in my thoughts, fears, and desires. One night, after a particularly stressful day at work, I wrote down everything I was feeling, and it brought clarity and peace. I even started jotting down 3 things I was grateful for each day, which helped me shift focus from what was lacking to what I already had. It's a grounding habit that's as therapeutic as it is insightful. Habit 3. Setting a daily intention. This was a small but profound change. Every morning, I take a few minutes to set a single intention for the day, like practice patience or focus on gratitude. It created a mindful approach to my day and reminded me of my priorities when things got hectic. I found myself more focused, grounded, and in tune with my actions. Setting an intention doesn't have to be complicated. Think of it as giving your day a purpose or a theme. It can be a powerful anchor in moments of stress. Habit 4. Waking up early. The first game changer was simply waking up earlier. I used to be a late riser, hitting snooze until the last minute. Mornings were rushed and chaotic, setting a hectic tone for the whole day. But when I challenged myself to start waking up at 5 a.m., things changed, and fast. Those first days weren't easy, but by day 3, I began to feel the calm and quiet that came with the early hours. There's something almost magical about having the world to yourself as it wakes up. With those extra moments, I could stretch, meditate, and plan my day without feeling rushed. Even watching the sunrise felt grounding and gave me a renewed sense of gratitude. If you're not a morning person, try setting your alarm 15 minutes earlier each day. Those small steps toward an unrushed start will pay off in ways you can't imagine. Habit 5. Daily exercise. The second habit that shifted my life was committing to daily exercise. I wasn't a fitness fanatic and used every excuse to skip workouts. I'm too tired, there's no time, you name it. But 1 week I decided enough was enough. I started with just 20 minutes each day, mixing up light jogs, yoga, and simple strength exercises. Initially my muscles ached and I felt exhausted, but by the 4th day I was waking up with more energy, my mood brighter, and my focus sharper. Exercise became less about calories and more about a daily dose of self-care. It was a moment to connect with myself, leave behind stress, and tune in to my own needs. Habit 6. Mindful eating. Mindful eating was a small change that had a big impact. I used to eat quickly, often while on my phone or laptop, barely paying attention. But when I committed to eating without distractions, I realized how much I'd been missing. By setting aside screens and slowing down, I began to taste and enjoy each bite, noticing the flavors and textures as though experiencing them for the first time. Eating slowly helped me recognize when I was full and naturally reduced overeating. This mindful practice brought gratitude and awareness to my meals, helping me connect with food in a healthier, more fulfilling way. Habit 7. Practicing self-compassion. The final habit was a lesson in self-compassion. Whenever I stumbled or faced setbacks, I tended to be hard on myself. But instead, I started reminding myself to be as kind to myself as I would to a friend. Whenever I made a mistake, I'd pause, take a breath, and remind myself that it's okay to not be perfect. Self-compassion became a powerful tool in my growth, helping me recover from setbacks faster and with more resilience. Remember, progress isn't a straight line, and self-kindness goes a long way. Habit 8. Decluttering my space. I'd underestimated how much clutter in my physical space was affecting my mental space. I started by setting aside 10 minutes each day to clear one area of my home, a desk, a drawer, or a closet. As I decluttered, I felt a sense of relief and clarity, noticing how much easier it was to focus and relax. Having a tidy space gave me a calm, clear environment to start and end my days. If you find yourself feeling overwhelmed or distracted, try small decluttering sessions. It's amazing how much peace a clean space can bring. Habit 9. Limiting screen time. Limiting screen time was one of the harder habits to tackle. Our screens have become our lifelines, but I realized they were draining my energy, affecting my sleep, and distracting me from the present. I set a daily limit of 1 hour for non-essential screen use, which was tough but enlightening. Suddenly I had extra time to read, go for a walk, and reconnect with forgotten hobbies. I even found my sleep improving as I left my phone out of my bedtime routine. Reclaiming that time helped me be more present, more engaged, and less anxious. If you're struggling to cut back, start by setting small limits and see how it feels. Habit 10. Learning something new. Every day, whether it's reading a few pages of a book, listening to a podcast, or trying out a new skill, committing to learning each day brought a refreshing sense of growth. I realized I was often stuck in my routine, and by setting aside even 10-15 minutes for learning, I opened myself to new ideas and perspectives. It could be as simple as a few words in a new language or watching an educational video. Learning daily keeps your mind sharp and adds a little spark of excitement to each day. It's a reminder that growth doesn't have to be big or immediate. It's in those consistent small steps. Each of these 10 habits has been transformative in its own way, contributing to a more mindful, balanced, and fulfilling life. If any of these resonate with you, try incorporating 1 or 2 into your week. Start small, embrace the process, and remember, it's about progress, not perfection. Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear which habits you're trying, or if you have questions on how to start. And of course, if you found this helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more life-changing insights. Thanks for joining me on this journey. Remember, small steps can lead to massive transformations. See you in the next video, and keep being awesome. Thank you for joining us today on Ancient Wisdom. If you found value in these timeless teachings, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe for more insights from the ages. Stay wise, and see you in the next one. Most people avoid directly telling you they dislike you, instead hiding behind polite gestures and surface-level friendliness. They might appear supportive, but subtle actions often reveal the truth. Recognizing these signs early allows you to protect your energy and prioritize relationships that genuinely bring value to your life. Here are 10 signs that someone may be harboring hidden resentment toward you, with personal examples for relatability. First sign: they disappear when you need support. You know the saying, "A friend in need is a friend indeed." Well, some people seem to disappear the moment you actually need them. I remember a time when I was going through a really tough breakup. I reached out to a friend I thought would be there, but every call went to voicemail. Every text got a short "busy right now" response. Meanwhile, I'd see them active on social media, posting about weekend adventures. It hit hard because I had been there for this friend through their dark times, and seeing that they couldn't do the same made me realize something. Real friends don't vanish when the going gets tough. If someone only sticks around for the good times, it's a sign they might not genuinely care about you. You deserve people who show up when it matters most, even if it's just a call to check in. Second sign: subtle exclusion from plans. Have you ever scrolled through your social media feed only to find out your friends had a blast without you? I remember checking Instagram one Saturday night and seeing pictures of my friend group at this amazing concert I would have loved to go to, only no one had told me about it. When I brought it up casually later, they all acted surprised, saying, "Oh, we thought you were busy," or "It was so last minute." It stung because, deep down, I knew that if they'd really wanted me there, they would have asked. Real friends make sure you know about plans. When people repeatedly leave you out, it's often a subtle, passive way of saying they don't value your presence. And that's a hard pill to swallow, but accepting it can help you redirect your energy to people who genuinely want you around. Third sign: their jokes are always at your expense. Light-hearted teasing is one thing, but when someone's jokes consistently poke fun at your insecurities or flaws, it's a red flag. I used to laugh along with a friend who'd constantly make jokes about my quirky work habits or the way I'd dress, thinking it was harmless. But over time, those jokes started chipping away at my confidence. I'd second-guess what I wore or feel self-conscious about speaking up at work. If someone's jokes leave you feeling small or hurt, it's often a way of masking deeper resentment or disrespect. A real friend doesn't need to mock your quirks to have a laugh. They support you as you are. Learning to say, "That's not funny to me," and setting boundaries with so-called jokes can make a huge difference in how you see yourself and how others treat you. Fourth sign: they avoid physical contact. Have you ever gone to give someone a high five, a hug, or even just a casual touch on the shoulder, only for them to pull away like you're contagious? I had a colleague who was warm and friendly with everyone else, but every time I'd offer a simple handshake or friendly pat, they'd awkwardly sidestep it. At first I thought maybe they just weren't a touchy person, but seeing them be tactile with everyone else was a bit of an eye-opener. Physical contact is a basic human connection, so when someone goes out of their way to avoid it with you, they're communicating a level of discomfort or distance. It might be hard to admit, but paying attention to these subtle cues can save you from investing in relationships where the other person isn't fully on board. Chitifao. Fifth sign: they give backhanded compliments. Have you ever received a compliment that didn't feel good at all? Once, after pouring my heart into a work project, a colleague looked at me and said, "Wow, that turned out surprisingly well for you." It was one of those compliments that left me feeling confused and a little bruised. It took me a while to realize that they weren't genuinely happy for me. They were subtly putting me down. These backhanded compliments are often hidden attempts to keep you questioning your abilities. If a friend's compliments leave you feeling small, it's time to call it out or at the very least, recognize that their words have more to do with their insecurities than your worth. Sixth sign, they avoid making eye contact. Eye contact is one of the most basic yet powerful ways we connect with each other. I had a friend who, after a small disagreement, started looking everywhere but at me during conversations. They'd glance at their phone, look at the wall, anywhere but my eyes. It made everything feel awkward and distant. When someone consistently avoids eye contact, it's often because they're uncomfortable or hiding something. I learned that rather than ignoring these signs, it's best to address them. If you're sensing that someone feels uneasy around you, bring it up gently. It might clear the air or help you realize they're not worth the emotional energy. Seventh sign, they're busy, only when it comes to you. Have you ever had a friend who's always busy when you try to make plans, but somehow has time for everyone else? I tried reconnecting with an old friend, only to be met with excuse after excuse. Meanwhile, I'd see them hanging out with mutual friends. It's hard to admit, but the truth is, if someone really wants to spend time with you, they'll find a way. I learned that it wasn't about their schedule, it was about their priorities. Real friends don't keep you on the back burner. They make time for you because they want you in their life. So if someone is constantly busy just with you, it may be time to stop chasing after them. Eighth sign, they gossip about you behind your back. Gossip can be incredibly painful, especially when it comes from someone you trusted. I once confided in a friend about a personal issue, only to hear a distorted version of my story come back to me from mutual friends. When I confronted them, they acted like it was no big deal. But gossip is never harmless. It's a betrayal that erodes trust. True friends respect your privacy and protect your reputation. I learned that if someone is eager to share your personal matters with others, they're showing you they're not worthy of your trust. Surround yourself with people who honor the trust you place in them. Ninth sign, they regularly undermine your opinions. When someone constantly shoots down your ideas or always corrects your opinions, they're subtly showing they don't value your perspective. I remember sharing my opinion in a group setting, only for one person to jump in with, "Well, actually, every time." It wasn't that they disagreed, it was that they seemed determined to undermine me. It felt like they enjoyed making me second-guess myself. Real friends don't need to assert dominance over you. They respect your opinions even when they differ. When you notice this pattern, remind yourself that your voice matters and don't let someone else diminish it. 10th sign. They're polite but distant. Have you ever met someone who's always polite but never genuinely warm? I once worked with someone who was nice on the surface, but the conversations never went deeper than, "Hey, how's it going?" They'd never ask about my interests, my life, or anything personal, and after a while, it felt like I was talking to a wall. Sometimes politeness can be a mask, a way for someone to keep you at a comfortable distance without building any real connection. When someone feels polite but distant, they're showing they're not interested in forming a meaningful bond. It's okay to let go and focus on people who genuinely want to know you beyond the surface. Recognizing these signs isn't always easy, especially when you want to see the best in people, but taking a step back and observing how others treat you allows you to invest your energy in relationships that are authentic and fulfilling. Stoicism teaches us that self-respect and emotional peace are worth more than maintaining connections with those who don't value us. By paying attention to these signs, you can create space for people who genuinely support, celebrate, and uplift you, enriching your life in ways that truly matter. Thank you for joining us today on Ancient Wisdom. If you found value in these timeless teachings, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe for more insights from the ages. Stay wise and see you in the next one. Have you ever felt completely drained from always putting others first, only to realize that your kindness sometimes comes back to bite you? Trust me, I know that feeling all too well. We're told from a young age to be compassionate and give selflessly, but what happens when being overly generous starts to take a serious toll on our well-being? In this video, I want to share some surprising ways being too kind can actually work against you, and more importantly, how you can protect yourself while still caring for others. Let's dive in and explore the balance between giving to others and giving yourself the respect you deserve. I'll get started with this in-depth exploration of how kindness, while noble, can sometimes work against us if not balanced properly. Here's the first elaborated idea. People will depend on you too much. When I first started helping out my friends and family regularly, I felt like I was making a difference. I'd be the person they'd call if they needed a ride, a listening ear, or help with a project. At first, it was heartwarming to feel needed, but slowly I noticed a shift. People began to expect my help rather than appreciate it. My phone would buzz constantly with requests that grew in size and frequency. A friend might call last minute, expecting me to drive an hour just to babysit, or a coworker would ask me to cover for them again. Over time, this constant giving made me feel exhausted and unappreciated. Instead of focusing on my own tasks and goals, I'd be scrambling to fulfill others' needs. I barely had time to breathe, and what was worse, the people I helped rarely considered that I had responsibilities of my own. They had grown so accustomed to my assistance that they assumed I was always available. The more I gave, the less I felt seen, and eventually the imbalance began to affect my peace of mind and energy levels. The Stoic principle of self-care and knowing when to prioritize oneself became vital for me. I had to learn to say no, even though it felt uncomfortable. Setting boundaries didn't mean I stopped caring. It just meant recognizing that if I neglected my well-being, I wouldn't have much left to give. It was tough to accept that some people wouldn't take it well, but I had to put my health and peace first. These days, I consciously choose when to offer my time, making sure my needs are met so I can show up fully for others without feeling overwhelmed. It's a balancing act, but one worth mastering. You'll attract opportunists. I used to think that being overly generous would naturally build stronger and deeper relationships. After all, I believed that helping others would create bonds rooted in gratitude and mutual support. But reality hit me hard when I noticed a pattern. Some people were only around when they needed something. I remember a particular friend from work who would always reach out when they needed help on a project or a favor. When I needed support or just wanted to hang out for fun, they were mysteriously unavailable. It started to feel like a one-sided transaction instead of a genuine friendship. I realized that my open-hearted generosity was like a beacon for opportunists. These people gravitated toward me, drawn by the idea that I'd always be there to lend a hand, share my resources, or offer emotional support. Instead of building connections that were mutually enriching, I found myself drained by interactions with people who only cared about what they could gain. They would soak up my energy, take what they needed, and vanish until the next time they were in need. There was no reciprocity, no sense of partnership, only depletion. It became clear to me that while kindness is a beautiful quality, it needs to be paired with discernment. Just because I had the ability to help didn't mean I was obligated to. The Stoics emphasize wisdom and the ability to judge situations wisely, and that wisdom became crucial. Now, I'm more intentional about where I invest my energy. I've learned to recognize when someone's presence in my life is opportunistic and to distance myself accordingly. It's not about withholding kindness. It's about protecting my spirit from those who don't value the relationship beyond what they can take from it. In the end, quality over quantity matters when it comes to who we let into our lives. You could miss out on self-care. Putting everyone else first feels noble at first, doesn't it? I remember thinking I was being the best version of myself when I made sacrifices to help others. Whether it was volunteering for a late-night project at work or spending an entire weekend helping a friend move, I was the person who would always say yes. But after a while, I noticed something concerning. I was neglecting my own needs. My physical and emotional health started to decline, and I was too drained to do anything about it. There was a day that really drove the point home. I had just spent hours running errands for my family, and by the time I got back home, I was completely spent. My muscles ached, and my mind was foggy. All I wanted was to rest, maybe take a hot bath or watch a movie, but another friend called asking for help. Despite being exhausted, I reluctantly agreed. I showed up for them, but internally I was resentful and angry. I realized that my selflessness was starting to feel more like a burden than a gift. Self-care isn't selfish, it's foundational. The Stoics teach that self-mastery and a well-ordered mind are crucial for a fulfilled life. I couldn't take care of anyone if I didn't first take care of myself. So, I started scheduling me time and protecting it fiercely. Whether it's a morning walk, a long bath, or just reading a book in peace, I prioritize those moments. If someone asks for my help during that time, I've learned to politely decline or reschedule. Now, I'm healthier, happier, and more genuinely present when I do choose to help others. It's not about doing less. It's about doing things from a place of abundance rather than exhaustion. People might think you're weak. It's hard to believe, but sometimes kindness can be interpreted as a lack of strength or confidence. I've experienced this firsthand. When I was younger, I thought being agreeable and accommodating would make me well-liked. I rarely spoke up for myself, rarely set boundaries, and always tried to make everyone happy. But instead of earning respect, I noticed people started treating me as if I couldn't stand up for myself. My peers at work began piling extra tasks onto me, assuming I wouldn't push back. Even friends would jokingly say, "Oh, you know they'll do it, they never say no." Deep down, I felt frustrated and taken for granted, but I didn't want to risk disappointing anyone. This went on until a particularly eye-opening moment with a co-worker. I had just pulled an all-nighter finishing a report for them. And when I mentioned how tired I was, they shrugged and said, "You're too nice for your own good. You should have said no." It hit me. Even the people benefiting from my kindness saw me as a pushover. That stung, but it was the wake-up call I needed. The Stoic idea of self-discipline and asserting your boundaries became a guiding principle for me. I learned that being strong doesn't mean being harsh. It means valuing yourself enough to set limits. The first time I said no to an unreasonable request, I was terrified. But to my surprise, the world didn't end. In fact, people began respecting me more. They realized I had my own priorities and couldn't be guilted into overextending myself. It's about finding that balance, being kind, but not at the expense of your own dignity. Setting boundaries showed people I was not only kind, but also strong and self-respecting, and that changed everything. You might develop a habit of avoidance. Constantly focusing on others can sometimes be a way to run away from yourself, I used to fill my days with endless acts of service, staying busy to the point of exhaustion. It made me feel good on the surface, like I was doing something valuable. But when I was alone and things got quiet, a sense of discomfort would wash over me. If you've ever found yourself avoiding stillness because it brings up thoughts or emotions you'd rather not face, you'll know what I'm talking about. I had to confront the fact that my giving nature was sometimes a distraction from my own unresolved issues. If I kept my calendar packed with commitments, I didn't have to think about my insecurities or the lingering fears I hadn't dealt with. This realization came one weekend when all my plans fell through, and I was left with nothing but my thoughts. I felt a wave of anxiety, and it became clear that I had been using busyness as an emotional shield. The Stoics emphasized the importance of self-reflection and inner strength. I realized that running away from myself wasn't sustainable, so I started to create space in my life for introspection. It was difficult at first, but gradually I learned to face my feelings head-on. I journaled, practiced mindfulness, and even took long walks by myself to get comfortable with my own company. This self-awareness not only helped me grow, but also made my acts of kindness more genuine, as they were no longer fueled by a desire to escape my own struggles. It's about being there for others, while also being brave enough to face your own inner world. Your goals will be ignored. Have you ever felt like your dreams are slipping further away because you're too busy helping others with theirs? That was me. I had a long list of personal goals: writing a book, learning a new language, and even launching a passion project that I'd been dreaming about for years. But every time I thought I'd make progress, someone would call needing a favor. Of course, I'd say, pushing my goals aside. Whether it was helping a friend move or volunteering for an extra project at work, I constantly prioritized others. Before I knew it, years had passed, and my dreams remained just that, dreams. One of the hardest things to admit was that I was sabotaging my own potential. It wasn't just about being nice, it was about a fear of putting myself first. I thought people would label me as selfish or ungrateful. But the Stoics teach us the importance of living by reason and aligning our actions with our values. And my values included making my dreams a reality. This forced me to take a hard look at where my time and energy were going. I realized that saying yes to everything meant saying no to my own aspirations. So, I made a change. I started scheduling time for my goals, treating them with the same importance as I treated everyone else's needs. When someone asked for my help, I'd evaluate whether it aligned with my priorities. If it didn't, I'd politely decline or suggest a compromise. It wasn't easy, especially the first time I had to tell a friend I couldn't help them because I had my own commitments. But over time, I noticed a difference. My passion projects began to flourish, and I felt more fulfilled and in control of my life. Protecting your goals doesn't make you selfish. It ensures you're living a balanced, purposeful life. People will doubt your intentions. It's counterintuitive, but sometimes being too nice can make people suspicious. I experienced this with a colleague who once said, "Why are you always so helpful? What's your angle?" I was shocked. My intentions were pure, but to them, my generosity seemed too good to be true. In a world where people are used to hidden agendas and ulterior motives, extreme kindness can raise red flags. It's like when a stranger offers you free tickets or a too good to be true deal. You immediately wonder what the catch is. At first, this reaction hurt. I couldn't believe people would question my sincerity, but looking back, I can see how it might have seemed unusual. When people are too nice, especially in environments where trust is scarce, others can become wary. They wonder if you're trying to win favor or manipulate them in some way. It was a hard pill to swallow, but it made me realize that overextending myself might not be the best approach. The Stoics remind us to act in line with our values, regardless of how others perceive us. That wisdom helped me find a middle ground. I didn't stop being kind, but I did become more selective about where and how I invested my energy. Instead of spreading myself thin, I focused on meaningful acts of kindness for people I genuinely cared about. By being more intentional, I reduced the suspicion and created space for deeper, more authentic connections. I learned that quality trumps quantity in relationships, and kindness, when balanced with self-respect, carries more weight and credibility. You might end up feeling used. I remember a time when I was constantly there for everyone, always the dependable friend, the co-worker who'd cover extra shifts, the family member who'd drop everything to lend a hand. At first, it felt good to be needed, but that feeling quickly faded as I noticed a troubling pattern. People only reached out when they wanted something. Invitations to catch up or check in just to see how I was doing, almost non-existent. Slowly, I began to feel used, like a resource rather than a person with my own needs and emotions. It all came to a head when I helped a friend move, spending my entire weekend carrying boxes and organizing their new place. A few weeks later, I found myself in need of a favor, a small one, and that same friend was suddenly too busy. The disappointment cut deep, and I felt a wave of resentment. It wasn't the first time either. My acts of kindness were met with expectations, not appreciation, and that left me feeling drained and bitter. The Stoics teach us that emotional balance is crucial and that our peace of mind should never be dependent on others' behavior. I realized that I had to change how I gave, not to receive something in return, but to protect my own well-being. I started asking myself, am I giving because I truly want to, or am I giving out of obligation or a need for validation? If the answer was the latter, I paused. It's okay to be kind, but it's equally okay to protect yourself from feeling used. By being mindful of who I give to and why, I've learned to preserve my energy and ensure that I'm acting from a place of genuine care, not from a fear of disappointing others. Your kindness might enable irresponsibility. Have you ever found yourself doing so much for someone that they no longer felt the need to handle their own responsibilities? I've definitely been there. A close family member once struggled with managing their finances, and I would always swoop in to pay their bills or help them organize their expenses. I thought I was doing the right thing, being supportive and easing their burden. But in reality, my constant rescue missions enabled their financial irresponsibility. They didn't feel the pressure to learn or change because I was always there to save the day. It's a harsh reality. Sometimes our kindness can do more harm than good. The Stoics emphasize the importance of moderation and rational decision-making, and that applies to giving as well. If we constantly take over someone's responsibilities, we rob them of the opportunity to grow and become independent. This doesn't mean we shouldn't help. It means we should be mindful of how we help. Instead of always stepping in, we can offer guidance and support while still encouraging them to take ownership of their problems. Now, I'm more intentional about how I assist others. For that same family member, I stopped offering financial bailouts. Instead, I helped them set up a budget and encouraged them to seek advice from a professional. It wasn't easy to watch them struggle at first, but it was necessary for their growth. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is to let people learn from their mistakes and find their own strength. That's how we empower others without sacrificing our own peace. You'll feel overwhelmed and stressed. Being everyone's go-to helper might seem honorable, but it's a fast track to burnout. I used to say yes to everything, helping friends move, volunteering for extra work, taking care of family errands, and it left me feeling constantly overwhelmed. My schedule was packed to the point that I barely had time to rest or even enjoy simple things, like reading a book or taking a quiet walk. The stress built up, affecting not only my mental health but my physical well-being too. I'd lie awake at night, my mind racing with all the things I had to do for everyone else. One morning, I woke up exhausted and thought, how did I get here? The answer was simple. I hadn't set boundaries. I was so focused on being available for everyone else that I neglected my own needs. The Stoics teach us the value of balance and self-control, and it became clear that I needed to make some changes. It was time to stop treating self-care as a luxury and start treating it as a necessity. I learned to say no without feeling guilty, and it was life-changing. I prioritized my well-being and even scheduled do-nothing time where I could just relax or do something I loved. If a friend asked for help during my designated self-care hours, I'd explain that I had a prior commitment, even if that commitment was to myself. Setting these boundaries helped me show up more fully when I did choose to help, without feeling overburdened or stressed. It taught me that it's possible to be kind and generous without sacrificing my own peace and happiness. Strategies to protect yourself. Listen to your emotions. It took me a long time to realize that my body and emotions were trying to tell me something every time I felt burned out from helping others. I used to ignore those feelings, brushing them off as a sign that I just needed to work harder or be more selfless. But the truth is, our emotions and physical sensations are often our first indicators that something is off balance. There was a time when I agreed to help a friend organize a huge event. I thought it would be fun and rewarding, but as the weeks went by, I started feeling a heavy sense of dread and anxiety. I wasn't sleeping well, and I felt on edge every time my phone buzzed with another request for help. I'd push through, telling myself that feeling resentful wasn't kind or right, but the resentment kept building. Eventually, I snapped at my friend over something minor, and that's when I knew I had to pause and reflect. The Stoics emphasize the importance of self-awareness, and I realized I needed to honor my emotions instead of ignoring them. Our feelings serve as messengers, telling us when we've stretched ourselves too thin. Now, I pay close attention to how I feel when helping someone. If I notice that familiar anxiety creeping in or feel a wave of exhaustion, I give myself permission to step back. I might take a walk, meditate, or journal about what's bothering me. These moments of self-care allow me to reset and determine whether I'm giving from a place of genuine generosity or from obligation and burnout. By tuning into my emotions, I can make sure my kindness is sustainable and not at the cost of my own well-being. Embrace the power of saying no. Saying no used to make me feel like the worst person in the world. I'd imagine the disappointment in the other person's eyes, and guilt would eat me alive. But over the years, I've come to see that no is one of the most liberating and self-respecting words we can use. There was a time when I was juggling work, family commitments, and helping out at a community center. One evening, a friend asked if I could join a committee for a new project. My gut screamed no, but I felt too guilty to say it. So I agreed, even though it meant giving up my one free evening for self-care. Fast forward a month, and I was exhausted, stressed, and frustrated. I hadn't taken a single moment for myself, and I was growing resentful. That's when I realized that saying no wasn't selfish. It was necessary. The Stoics teach us that we must respect our own time and energy. So I practiced in front of the mirror, telling myself, "It's okay to say no. Your well-being matters." When I finally said no to the next request, I felt a mix of relief and fear. But to my surprise, the world didn't collapse. People adjusted, and some even respected me more for setting boundaries. Now, I remind myself that no is not a rejection of the person asking. It's an affirmation of my own limits. It allows me to say yes to things that truly matter, with energy and joy. And when I do say yes, I know it's coming from a place of genuine willingness, not out of guilt or obligation. Schedule time. Just for yourself. Carving out time for myself used to feel like an indulgence I couldn't afford. My schedule was always filled with commitments, whether it was work projects, family responsibilities, or friends needing a hand. But one day I had a wake-up call. I was so worn out from running around non-stop that I came down with a fever and had to spend a whole weekend in bed. That forced rest made me realize how much I'd neglected myself. The Stoics talk about living in harmony with our nature, and part of that is recognizing when we need rest and solitude to recharge. So I started blocking out time on my calendar for self-care. It could be as simple as an hour to read a book, go for a walk, or even just sit quietly with a cup of tea. At first, I felt guilty. I'd think, what if someone needs me during this time? But I knew I had to protect it. When a friend called during one of my designated self-care hours, I simply said, "I'm not available right now. Can we catch up later?" It felt strange at first, but also incredibly empowering. Scheduling time for myself has become a non-negotiable part of my life. It's not about being unavailable to others. It's about being fully present when I do show up. By guarding this time fiercely, I've become more grounded, energized, and able to help others from a place of abundance rather than depletion. Now, self-care isn't a luxury. It's an essential part of my routine, and I'm all the better for it. Set clear boundaries. Identifying and dealing with energy vampires was one of the hardest but most necessary changes I had to make. We all know those people who leave us feeling exhausted after every interaction, right? For me, it was a former co-worker who would constantly vent about her problems but never seemed interested in solving them. Every conversation drained me, and I realized I was becoming a sounding board for someone who had no intention of changing or reciprocating support. Setting boundaries felt uncomfortable at first. I didn't want to come across as rude or unkind, but the Stoics emphasize that our well-being is our responsibility, and I had to take that to heart. I began to limit my interactions with this co-worker, gently steering conversations away from negativity or cutting them short when they became too draining. I'd say, "I'm really sorry you're dealing with that, but I need to focus on some work right now." It wasn't easy, and I felt guilty for a while, but over time, I noticed how much lighter I felt when I prioritized my mental energy. It's not just about avoiding draining people, but also about nurturing relationships that uplift and inspire me. I've learned to protect my time and energy fiercely. If someone's presence consistently leaves me feeling worse, I limit my interactions or, in some cases, walk away entirely. It's about valuing my own well-being as much as I value others. And by doing so, I've made space for people who bring joy, wisdom, and balance into my life. Setting boundaries doesn't make me less kind. It makes me healthier and stronger, which ultimately allows me to give more authentically. Being kind is one of life's greatest virtues, but when taken to the extreme, it can backfire. The Stoic philosophy reminds us that everything should be done in moderation, including generosity. By setting boundaries, being intentional about where we direct our energy, and remembering to take care of ourselves, we can continue to be kind without feeling used, stressed, or depleted. It's all about finding that sweet spot, the balance between giving to others and honoring our own needs. Remember, you deserve the same kindness you show to everyone else, and sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is to respect your own well-being. Thank you for joining me on this journey of self-discovery and balance. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more wisdom rooted in Stoic principles. Your support helps this channel grow, and I'm so grateful to have you here. Today, we are setting out to understand anger, a force that often disrupts our peace and clarity. Anger is not an enemy to be feared, but a natural response that can either consume us or be transformed into something constructive. Stoicism teaches us that our emotions, while natural, need not dictate our actions or cloud our judgment. Instead, we can learn to approach anger with wisdom, using it to uncover deeper truths about ourselves. In this session, we'll explore how to meet anger with patience, understanding, and, ultimately, self-mastery. We'll look at practical ways to transform anger into clarity and frustration into insight, allowing us to engage with life's challenges from a place of inner calm and resilience. The Stoics believed that freedom comes from within, and that a truly powerful individual is one who masters themselves, not others. As we go through these principles, I invite you to reflect on how each can guide you toward a more peaceful, fulfilling life. 1. See anger as a signal, not a solution. I've learned that anger often points us towards something deeper, like an unmet need, a boundary crossed, or even a fear lurking beneath the surface. For example, if I'm frustrated with a friend who's consistently late, my anger isn't necessarily about the weight. It's often about feeling disrespected or undervalued. Recognizing this underlying reason helps me to separate the situation from my reaction. Instead of seeing anger as a call to react immediately, I can view it as a reminder to address my needs in a constructive way. This perspective shift takes practice. When I feel anger rise, I pause and ask myself, what is this really about? This simple question can transform anger from a force that clouds judgment into a tool for self-discovery. It encourages me to dig deeper and confront the root issue. Maybe I need to set clearer boundaries, communicate better, or work on my own insecurities. Viewing anger as a signal rather than a solution also makes interactions more productive. Instead of letting anger take control, I take responsibility for understanding and addressing my own needs. This practice has helped me maintain stronger, healthier relationships because I'm not constantly reacting to surface-level frustrations. Instead, I'm tackling the underlying issues, which leads to growth for everyone involved. It's about using anger as a catalyst for change, not as fuel for conflict. 2. Treat patience as a muscle to strengthen. I used to think patience was something you either had or didn't. But Stoic philosophy taught me that patience is a skill, like a muscle you can train and strengthen over time. Imagine waiting in a long line or dealing with traffic. Two situations that used to make me tense up. Instead of getting frustrated, I now see these as little patience workouts. Each time I choose to stay calm, it's like doing a mental rep that builds my patience for bigger challenges. To practice, I start by focusing on my breathing when frustration builds. I'll count each inhale and exhale, letting my mind settle. I might also use the moment to think of something I'm grateful for. For example, if I'm stuck in traffic, I remind myself how lucky I am to have a reliable car or to be heading home to loved ones. It sounds simple, but this shift in focus helps me turn what would have been a stressful moment into a peaceful one. Over time, these small exercises add up, and I've noticed I'm much more patient in situations that used to frustrate me. Whether it's handling delays or managing people who test my limits, patience has become a skill I can lean on. Treating patience as something I can improve has been a game changer, and it's helped me approach life with more ease and resilience. 3. Recognize what's within your control. One of the most transformative Stoic principles is the idea of control. There's so much in life we have zero power over, from other people's behavior to unexpected events. This used to frustrate me endlessly because I felt like things were happening to me. But Stoicism teaches us to focus only on what we can control: our actions, our responses, and our mindset. For instance, if someone acts rudely, it's tempting to take it personally and react in kind. But recognizing that I can't control their behavior, only my response, gives me a new sense of freedom. Instead of feeling like a victim to their actions, I focus on how I choose to react. This shift has been incredibly empowering. I no longer waste energy trying to change things that are beyond my control. Instead, I invest that energy into areas where I can make a real difference, like my own thoughts and behaviors. I also apply this to broader life situations. If a project at work doesn't go as planned, or a trip gets cancelled, I remind myself that while I can't change these outcomes, I can control how I react. Maybe I use that extra time to pursue a hobby or spend time with family. This mindset shift has made my life much more peaceful because I'm no longer fighting against the inevitable. Instead, I'm focusing on what's within my reach. 4. Use mindfulness to catch yourself early. Mindfulness has been a game changer for me when it comes to managing anger. It's easy to get caught up in the heat of the moment, especially when something triggers us unexpectedly. But practicing mindfulness, staying aware of my thoughts and feelings in real time, has helped me catch anger early before it spirals out of control. When I feel that initial surge of frustration, I take a deep breath and focus on the sensation of breathing. This simple act brings me back to the present and creates a little mental pause. In that space, I can decide whether the situation really warrants a big reaction or if it's something I can let go of. Often I find that this quick pause is enough to see things more clearly. For example, if I get a frustrating email, I no longer fire off a response right away. I breathe, let the initial reaction settle, and come back to it when I'm calm. This practice of mindfulness has saved me from saying or doing things I'd regret. Over time, I've become better at recognizing anger as it arises, allowing me to control it rather than let it control me. Mindfulness isn't a cure-all, but it's a powerful tool. It gives me the space to choose my response consciously, rather than being driven by emotion. The more I practice, the more natural it becomes, helping me stay grounded in the moments that matter most. 5. Turn anger into curiosity. I used to see anger as something to suppress or avoid, but Stoicism introduced me to a different approach, turning anger into curiosity. Instead of reacting right away, I now try to ask myself, why does this bother me? This question shifts my focus from the external trigger to my internal response, helping me understand the deeper reasons behind my anger. For instance, if a friend makes a hurtful comment, my immediate reaction might be to feel defensive. But instead of snapping back, I pause and ask, what's really going on here? Sometimes I realize the comment triggered an insecurity of mine, or maybe I'm just tired and more sensitive. This insight doesn't excuse rude behavior, but it helps me respond thoughtfully instead of react impulsively. Curiosity also allows me to see the other person's perspective. Maybe they're dealing with their own issues or didn't mean to come across the way they did. By approaching anger with curiosity, I turn potentially tense moments into opportunities for growth and understanding. This approach has not only helped me manage my anger, but has also deepened my empathy and improved my relationships. 6. Practice empathy toward others' flaws. It's easy to get frustrated with others when they mess up or don't meet our expectations. But Stoicism reminds me to see these moments as opportunities to practice empathy. For instance, if someone makes a mistake at work or acts rudely, I try to consider what they might be going through. Maybe they're stressed, dealing with personal issues, or simply had a rough day. Instead of reacting with anger, I remind myself that they're human too, just like me. This shift from judgment to empathy has helped me stay calm and respond with compassion rather than frustration. It doesn't mean excusing poor behavior, it just means choosing understanding over anger. This mindset has not only made me more patient, but also improved my relationships, as people feel more comfortable around someone who sees their flaws with kindness. 7. Forgive to find freedom. Forgiveness used to feel like letting someone off the hook, but Stoicism has taught me that forgiveness is really about freeing myself. When I hold on to anger, I'm carrying that burden around with me, replaying events that only weigh me down. But when I choose to forgive, I'm not saying the hurtful behavior was okay. I'm simply releasing its hold over my peace of mind. One way I practice forgiveness is by reminding myself, I release this because it no longer serves me. Saying this out loud or in my mind gives me a sense of closure. Over time, I've noticed that forgiveness isn't about the other person at all. It's about choosing peace for myself. And when I let go of anger, I make space for more positive emotions, like compassion and joy. 8. Embrace the impermanence of feelings. One powerful Stoic insight is the recognition that everything, our anger, happiness, even challenges, is temporary. This concept has helped me immensely, especially during tough times. When I feel overwhelmed by anger, I remind myself, this, too, shall pass. Knowing that emotions are fleeting helps me ride out the storm without making impulsive decisions I might later regret. It's like watching waves crash on the shore. They come and go, but they don't stay. Realizing that anger is just a passing wave gives me the patience to let it flow without getting swept away. This practice helps me avoid saying or doing things I'll regret, all because I know the feeling is temporary. 9. Stop expecting others to understand. Sometimes my frustration stems from expecting others to get me, to understand my point of view. But not everyone will, and that's okay. When I let go of the need for others to fully understand or validate my feelings, I feel lighter and more at peace. I remind myself that my inner peace isn't dependent on others' opinions or approval. This doesn't mean I stop expressing myself, but I'm no longer waiting for a specific reaction. By releasing the expectation that others should see things my way, I feel less frustration and more acceptance. creating space for calm and mutual respect in my interactions. 10. Reflect on past anger to build future resilience. Reflecting on past moments when I let anger take over has been invaluable. I'll look back and ask myself, what could I have done differently? Did my reaction help or hurt the situation? This isn't about self-blame. It's about learning and growing so I can handle similar situations better in the future. Each reflection builds my resilience, helping me recognize patterns and improve my responses over time. By understanding how I handled past situations, I prepare myself to respond more calmly and constructively when anger inevitably comes up again. This process has helped me develop greater emotional strength and wisdom over time. Thank you for joining me on this journey to understand anger through a Stoic lens. Remember, Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotions, but about mastering our responses to them. Anger, like any emotion, is fleeting and doesn't have to define us. When we choose patience over impulse, we gain true freedom, the power to shape our own actions and find peace within, regardless of external circumstances. If these Stoic principles resonate with you and you're eager to cultivate more resilience and calm in your life, please give this video a like and consider subscribing to the channel. Together, we can continue exploring insights that bring us closer to inner strength and wisdom. And if you have your own thoughts or stories on managing anger, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Let's keep building a community centered on growth and wisdom. Ever wonder why some people naturally earn respect while others struggle? I used to think respect came from achievements, but I realized it's often lost through small, overlooked habits. Things like interrupting, seeking constant validation, or complaining seem harmless, but they quietly push people away. Drawing on Stoic philosophy, I've learned that real respect comes from living with integrity and self-awareness. The Stoics believed in habits that align with a life of dignity and genuine connection. If you've noticed people distancing themselves or respect slipping, it may be time to reflect on these small habits and replace them with actions that truly build trust and respect. 1. Neglecting to express appreciation. I never thought failing to say thank you could be so damaging. I used to think people understood how much I appreciated them without needing constant reminders. My friends and family, I assumed, would always just know that I valued their support and sacrifices. But I was wrong. A few years back, a close friend pulled me aside and said, "You know, sometimes it feels like you take me for granted." That hit me hard. I realized I'd grown so used to people being there for me that I'd stopped actively showing my gratitude. Little things like a quick thank you or a thoughtful note had slipped out of my routine. This lack of appreciation had created a rift I wasn't even aware of. Stoicism teaches us to be grateful, yet I'd neglected such a simple but powerful practice. Since then, I've tried to make a conscious effort to express my gratitude. Now I make sure to call my parents after they help with something, thank my colleagues when they go the extra mile, and let my friends know how much their presence means to me. The response has been incredible. People appreciate the small acknowledgements. I've noticed that expressing gratitude openly not only strengthens my connections, but also reminds me how fortunate I am to have these people in my life. It's amazing how something as simple as a thank you can bridge gaps and deepen bonds. 2. Gossiping. Gossiping was a habit I didn't even realize I had. In college, my friends and I would get together and dissect every little detail of our classmates' lives. At first, it seemed harmless, like a fun way to bond over shared secrets. But I quickly learned just how damaging gossip can be. One incident stands out. I shared something personal about a friend who wasn't in our circle, thinking it would be an interesting story. Unfortunately, that story made its way back to her. The disappointment in her eyes was something I'll never forget. She didn't get angry or make a scene. She simply withdrew from me. That's when it hit me. I'd violated her trust in a really careless way. Stoic philosophy emphasizes focusing on our own character and steering clear of judging others. Gossiping pulls us away from that principle and poisons the trust people have in us. Since that experience, I've tried to avoid gossip altogether. When I'm tempted, I remember how it felt to lose a friend over thoughtless words. Instead, I focus on building people up or staying silent if I have nothing positive to say. Gossip may seem harmless, but it erodes relationships and diminishes respect over time. I'm still not perfect, but I'm far more mindful now, and it's made my connections feel deeper and more authentic. 3. Refusing to take responsibility. Taking responsibility was something I struggled with for years. I used to think that admitting mistakes showed weakness, so I'd often find ways to dodge blame or make excuses. This habit really affected my work life. My boss once pointed out that while my work was good, I had a tendency to deflect accountability whenever things went wrong. This wasn't easy to hear, but it made me realize that my actions were costing me respect. Stoicism teaches that we should focus on what's within our control, including our responses to mistakes. I began to see that taking responsibility doesn't make you weak. It shows integrity. It took some time, but I started owning up to my errors, no matter how uncomfortable it felt. Now, if I mess up, I make it a point to acknowledge it and think about how I can improve. Not only has this earned me more respect, but I also feel a deeper sense of self-respect. People value honesty and accountability, and embracing those qualities has actually strengthened my relationships. Taking responsibility is empowering. It gives me control over my growth and my reputation. 4. Being unreliable. Being unreliable was a label I had to face, and it wasn't easy. In my early 20s, I had a terrible habit of making plans and then cancelling at the last minute. I'd tell people I'd be somewhere, only to change my mind when something more interesting came up. I didn't see the harm at first. Life's busy, right? But one night, I missed my best friend's birthday party because I'd decided to catch up on work instead. She had put so much effort into planning the event, and my last-minute cancellation really hurt her. I could tell from the look on her face when I finally saw her again. That was a wake-up call. I realized that being unreliable doesn't just inconvenience people, it shows them you don't respect their time. Since then, I've made a conscious effort to be someone others can count on. When I say I'll be somewhere, I show up. If I commit to something, I follow through. My relationships have improved because people know I take their time seriously. Stoicism teaches that our word should be something others can trust. By practicing reliability, I'm not just honoring others, I'm strengthening my own character. 5. Seeking constant validation. For a long time, I craved validation. Every achievement, big or small, had to be acknowledged by others for it to feel real to me. I'd find myself constantly checking for likes on social media, asking people if they thought I was doing well, and fishing for compliments. It became exhausting, not only for me, but also for those around me. One day, a friend told me, "You don't need our approval, you're doing great." It was a kind reminder, but it made me realize how dependent I'd become on others' opinions. Stoicism teaches us to build self-worth from within, not from the approval of others. Seeking constant validation only weakens our sense of self. Since then, I've tried to focus on internal validation. Instead of needing others to recognize my achievements, I ask myself if I feel proud of what I've done. It's a slow process, but I've noticed a difference in my confidence. I'm learning to trust my own judgment, and I've found that people respect me more when I'm not constantly looking to them for approval. Now, I strive to live in alignment with my values, regardless of what others think. 6. Interrupting others. I used to think that jumping into conversation showed enthusiasm. I'd often interrupt people mid-sentence, eager to share my thoughts or add my perspective. But I realized how disrespectful it was when a coworker pulled me aside after a meeting and said, "It feels like you're not really listening to us." That hit hard. I thought I was being engaged, but I was actually cutting people off and making them feel unheard. Stoicism emphasizes patience and respect in interactions. I began practicing active listening, giving people the space to finish their thoughts before responding. It was challenging at first because I had to resist the urge to jump in, but over time, I've seen how much more people appreciate conversations when they feel fully heard. Listening actively not only deepens my connections, but also helps me learn more from others. Now, I remind myself that conversations are about understanding, not just speaking. By focusing on truly listening, I show respect and build stronger, more meaningful connections. 7. Reacting defensively to feedback. I used to get defensive every time someone offered me constructive criticism. I'd see feedback as an attack on my abilities, and I'd often respond with excuses or counter-arguments. But this habit made people hesitate, to be honest with me. I realized how much this was holding me back when a mentor told me, "You have potential, but you're stopping yourself from growing." That was tough to hear, but it was also a turning point. Stoicism teaches us to accept feedback as a tool for growth rather than as a threat. I began practicing humility when receiving feedback. Instead of immediately reacting, I'd pause, take a breath, and genuinely listen. I learned to ask questions to understand how I could improve. This shift in mindset has been liberating. Now, I'm more open to feedback, and I find that people respect my willingness to learn. Embracing feedback has allowed me to grow in ways I hadn't imagined, and it's helped me build stronger relationships. Respect isn't about grand gestures. It's built through the small, everyday actions we choose. By letting go of habits that erode trust, we make room for deeper connections and a stronger sense of self-respect. The Stoics remind us that living with integrity isn't just about how others see us. It's about the peace we feel within ourselves. If this video helped you see areas for growth or inspired you to make positive changes, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Join us on this journey of self-improvement and wisdom, and let's keep building a life full of respect, resilience, and meaningful relationships. Thank you for watching, and stay strong, stay stoic. Have you ever looked around and felt like everyone was playing a part? I know I have. People wear masks every day, pretending to be someone they're not. And for the longest time, I struggled to see through it all. But once I learned to really pay attention to the subtle signs, the unguarded moments, the things people say when they think no one's watching, it felt like unlocking a hidden superpower. I could finally see people for who they truly are, not who they want to appear to be. These insights transformed my relationships, giving me a deeper, more authentic understanding of everyone around me. Here are 9 powerful ways I learned to read people without them even knowing, and I promise, once you see these signs, you'll never look at people the same way again. 1. Watch how they treat people in lesser positions. I once had a work friend who seemed like the nicest person in the world, always kind, funny, and respectful. We clicked right away, and I thought I had a great ally in the office. One day we went to lunch together and I saw a completely different side of him. The moment we sat down, he snapped his fingers to get the waiter's attention and barked his order without even looking up. He was short, dismissive, and treated the staff as if they were beneath him. I felt uncomfortable, but I also felt like I had learned something important. In that moment, I realized that true character is shown not by how someone treats those on their level or higher, but by how they treat those they consider beneath them. This realization has stayed with me ever since. The way people treat waitstaff, janitors, or anyone in a lesser position can be a crystal clear reflection of their character. It's easy to be kind and polite when you're dealing with someone you want to impress. But when there's no incentive, no one to impress, and no social reward for kindness, people's true colors often show. Stoicism encourages us to observe these small, telling moments without judgment, helping us understand the person behind the facade. Over the years, I've come to view these interactions as a powerful test of character. If someone is consistently respectful to everyone they meet, regardless of status, I know they're genuine. They value others for their humanity, not their position. But if they're dismissive, condescending, or rude to those they consider beneath them, it's a red flag. This behavior tells me they only put on a pleasant front when it benefits them. It's calculating, not genuine. I now pay close attention to these signs in my relationships and interactions, and they've saved me from disappointment many times. If someone treats the cashier, the janitor, or the waiter with respect, that's someone I feel comfortable investing my time and energy in. Conversely, if they're dismissive, rude, or entitled, I take it as a warning. In a way, this observation has become my own silent test for authenticity. It's a small but significant detail that reveals the truth about who people really are, a truth they may not even realize they're showing. 2. Body language. During moments of vulnerability. I once had a friend who was always the epitome of confidence. No matter the situation, he seemed unshakable. But one day, during a tough conversation, I noticed subtle shifts in his body language that revealed something deeper. He crossed his arms tightly across his chest, avoided eye contact, and tapped his fingers on the table. I realized that he was feeling exposed and vulnerable, and his body language betrayed the nerves he was working so hard to hide. Observing these moments has taught me how much people's bodies can reveal, especially when they're feeling uncomfortable or insecure. We're all wired to respond physically to stress, and our bodies often betray us in these vulnerable moments. Stoicism teaches us to observe these signs with calm curiosity, avoiding judgment, and instead seeking to understand what might be going on beneath the surface. This insight has helped me connect with others on a deeper level, seeing beyond their words and paying attention to what their bodies are really saying. When I see someone fidgeting, crossing their arms, or avoiding eye contact, I take it as a cue to approach the conversation more gently, acknowledging the discomfort they may be experiencing. It's a way to build trust, showing them that I'm not here to judge, but to listen. And I've noticed it in myself too. If I find myself crossing my arms or tapping my foot, it's a signal that I'm feeling uneasy, even if I'm not consciously aware of it. This awareness has become a powerful tool for understanding myself and others more deeply, allowing me to respond to people's needs with empathy rather than assumptions. Body language is a fascinating window into our unspoken emotions, and paying attention to it has changed the way I communicate. By recognizing these small cues, I'm able to see beyond what people are saying. understanding what they're truly feeling. It's a skill that brings clarity to my relationships, helping me connect with others in a more genuine and empathetic way. 3. Their past is the key to their present. I had a friend who seemed incredibly defensive, often reacting strongly to situations that didn't seem to warrant such intensity. For the longest time, I thought that was just who he was. But as I got to know him, he started sharing parts of his past, stories of betrayal, abandonment, and difficult relationships. Suddenly, his behaviors made perfect sense. Stoicism teaches us to approach others with understanding, looking at them objectively rather than jumping to conclusions. In this case, it allowed me to see my friend's defensiveness as a protective response, a shield he'd built over years of hardship. It made me realize that people's reactions are often influenced by experiences we may not even know about. Someone who's overly cautious or closed off in relationships might be carrying the weight of past betrayals. A person who overreacts to criticism could be reliving the insecurity they felt from being judged harshly as a child. Understanding that people are shaped by their past helps us approach them with more empathy. Instead of taking their behavior personally or assuming it's just who they are, we can consider the unseen experiences that may be influencing their actions. This perspective has shifted how I approach my relationships. If someone seems overly guarded or quick to anger, I remind myself that it might not be about me or the present situation. It could be an echo from their past, a reflection of unresolved pain. By viewing people through this lens, I'm able to approach them with greater compassion, understanding that their actions often stem from places of hurt rather than ill intent. This isn't about making excuses for harmful behavior, but about seeing people more fully. Our pasts shape who we are, often in ways we don't fully realize. When we acknowledge this, we become more forgiving, both toward others and ourselves. Stoicism encourages us to observe life as it is, and understanding the impact of the past on the present is part of seeing clearly. This perspective helps me foster healthier, more understanding connections with others, seeing their struggles and strengths with empathy. 4. Inconsistencies in their stories. I once worked with someone who loved telling stories about their life, adventures, achievements, and all the wild twists and turns. But over time, I started noticing small details in their stories that didn't add up. One day, they'd say something happened in 2018, and then the next time they'd say 2019. At first, I chalked it up to memory slips, but the more I listened, the more I noticed these little inconsistencies. Eventually, I realized there might be more to it. Stoicism teaches us to approach these moments with curiosity rather than suspicion, giving people the benefit of the doubt while observing patterns. I didn't confront them directly, but I began paying closer attention. Sure enough, their stories continued to shift, suggesting that they were either embellishing the truth or perhaps even creating stories to impress others. This experience taught me a valuable lesson about the power of observation. People often reveal more about themselves than they realize through the little details. Inconsistencies can be signs that they're adjusting the truth, maybe to avoid embarrassment, boost their image, or hide something they're not ready to share. It's a subtle but telling behavior that can give you insight into their authenticity. Now, I listen for these clues without jumping to conclusions. If I notice someone's story changes each time they tell it, I take it as a reminder to stay grounded in my perceptions. I may not always know the full story, but these inconsistencies remind me to look beyond appearances, listening carefully for the truth. Sometimes, what people don't say, or what they change, speaks louder than their words. 5. Emotional reactions reveal priorities. During a team meeting once, I saw a side of a colleague I'd never seen before. He was always so calm and collected, but that day when someone suggested a minor change to a project he was leading, he suddenly snapped. His reaction was intense, almost defensive, over something that seemed trivial. Later, I realized that this project wasn't just work for him, it was personal. It reflected his creativity, his effort, and his values. His reaction was a signal that this project held deep meaning for him. This experience made me realize that our strongest emotional reactions are often tied to our core priorities and values. Stoicism teaches us to view emotions as signals rather than flaws, helping us understand people's true motivations. Now, when I see someone react passionately, whether in anger, excitement, or frustration, I ask myself, what does this mean to them? People may not openly share their values, but their emotions can reveal what they hold closest to their hearts. This understanding has changed how I approach relationships. If someone reacts strongly to a suggestion, critique, or compliment, I know it's because it touches something important to them. By respecting these moments, I'm able to show empathy and build deeper connections. I also use this insight on myself, reflecting on my own strong reactions as indicators of my priorities. This perspective has made my relationships more fulfilling, as I'm better able to see what truly matters to others and communicate my values as well. 6. The Tell Me More technique. I was once in a debate with a friend about a silly topic, whether pineapple belongs on pizza. I was ready to counter every point he made, but instead of arguing, I said, "Tell me more." What happened next surprised me. Instead of defending his pizza preference, he started talking about childhood memories, family dinners, and even a funny story about why he disliked pineapple as a kid. The conversation went from light-hearted banter to a deeper connection, all because I chose to listen instead of argue. This experience taught me the power of asking people to elaborate without judgment. Stoicism emphasizes understanding others without attachment or interruption, creating space for them to reveal themselves. Since then, I've used the Tell Me More technique in so many different settings: debates, negotiations, and even casual conversations. It's a simple way to understand people's motivations, insecurities, and dreams. The beauty of this technique is that people often reveal far more than they intend when they feel truly heard. By staying calm and encouraging them to talk, I learn about their inner worlds without pushing or prying. This has become one of my favorite ways to connect with others because it allows them to feel seen and valued. The Tell Me More approach isn't just a conversation tool, it's a way of showing empathy and curiosity, helping me see people as they are and fostering trust. 7. Sudden tone changes. Signal. Lies or hesitation. I had a coworker who was usually smooth and confident, always delivering his words with charm. But one day, while discussing a deadline, his tone suddenly shifted. His words slowed down, his voice dropped, and he even stammered a bit. It was so unusual that I immediately sensed something was off. Later, I found out he hadn't made any progress on the project he claimed to be on top of. His tone change had been the telltale sign. This experience taught me how much a person's tone of voice can reveal, even more than the words they use. Stoicism encourages us to observe these subtle cues with a calm, objective eye. I didn't confront him right away. Instead, I noted the shift and took it as a clue to listen more closely. Since then, I've learned that tone changes can indicate more than lies. They can reveal discomfort, hesitation, or a struggle within a conflict. Now, I pay close attention to sudden shifts in tone. Whether someone's voice drops, speeds up, or becomes unusually cheerful, it often signals that there's something beneath the surface they're not sharing. This observation helps me navigate conversations more effectively, allowing me to understand what people are really feeling. It's a subtle yet powerful way to gain insight, often saying more about a person's truth than their words ever could. 8. Avoidance of certain topics. I once had a friend who would always dodge any mention of his family. If anyone brought it up, he'd quickly change the subject or make a joke to deflect. Over time, I realized this avoidance wasn't just a quirky habit. It was a way of protecting himself from uncomfortable emotions or memories. Stoicism teaches us to observe these boundaries with respect and curiosity, understanding that people often avoid topics because they hold unresolved feelings or personal insecurities. Since then, I've paid attention to what people consistently avoid discussing, whether it's family, money, or past relationships. It's a subtle clue about their values, priorities, or even pain points. When people avoid certain subjects, they're often signaling a need for privacy or a lack of readiness to confront those issues. By recognizing these boundaries, I'm able to show respect and understanding, connecting with people in a way that feels safe and supportive. This awareness has changed how I approach sensitive topics in relationships. I don't push people to discuss things they're not comfortable with, but I take note of the avoidance as a clue about their personal world. These off-limits subjects often carry more weight than we realize, revealing unspoken parts of someone's identity. Recognizing this allows me to better understand and respect others, fostering a more compassionate and thoughtful approach to my interactions. 9. Most honest moments are when they think no one's watching. I had a manager who was the picture of professionalism and support when our higher-ups were around. But as soon as they left, she became someone else, snapping at the team, showing zero respect, and even making condescending remarks. This taught me a powerful lesson. People's true character often emerges when they believe no one's watching. Stoicism reminds us that genuine virtue isn't dependent on an audience. It's about being consistent, no matter who's around. Since then, I've looked beyond people's public personas, observing how they act in quieter, unguarded moments. Those moments, when there's no one to impress, reveal more about a person's values and integrity than any grand gesture or public statement. I've noticed this in romantic relationships too. In the early days, people put on their best selves, but over time, it's those unobserved moments that show who they really are. When I see someone who's kind, respectful, and patient, even when they're alone or with people they think don't matter, I know they're genuine. Conversely, if they're only nice when it serves them, it tells me their kindness isn't authentic. It's performative. Stoicism teaches us to value these consistent actions as a measure of true character, aiming to live in alignment with our values at all times. Observing others in their unguarded moments has helped me understand them more deeply and reminds me to live authentically myself. Mastering the art of reading people is like having a key to unlock deeper, more genuine connections. By paying attention to subtle cues and unguarded moments, you can see beyond the surface and truly understand those around you. These 9 techniques, inspired by Stoic philosophy, can help you connect with others on a whole new level, while also helping you better understand yourself. If you found these insights valuable and want to keep growing in wisdom and emotional intelligence, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Join us on this journey to see the world and people with clarity and purpose. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more ways to unlock the power of ancient wisdom in your everyday life. Deception. It's such a peculiar thing, isn't it? The subtle art of concealing the truth, of twisting reality ever so slightly. We humans are strange creatures. We long for truth, yet we hide behind our own masks. And here's the paradox. Sometimes the ones we trust the most, the people who are closest to us, are the ones who engage in these little deceptions. It's not always out of malice, but often out of fear or insecurity. A desire to keep the world from seeing something too raw, too real. I remember a time when I believed I could always tell when someone was lying to me. Perhaps you've thought the same. We like to think we're good judges of character, that we can see through the veil of falsehood. But as life has a way of teaching us, reality is far more subtle, far more intricate. A lie is rarely obvious. It slips between words, in a slight change in expression, in the way someone's body turns away ever so slightly. Imagine, if you will, a person sitting across from you. They're speaking, and everything seems fine. But then you notice something. A slight hesitation, a shift in tone, a laugh where it doesn't belong. It's as if the truth is shimmering beneath the surface, almost calling out to you, yet still hidden. And in that moment, you can either turn away, choosing to preserve the comforting illusion, or you can look deeper, daring to see what lies beneath. So let us explore this together, not in judgment, not in suspicion, but in curiosity. Let's examine the subtle signs that someone might be hiding the truth from us. For these little tells, these small clues, are part of the rich tapestry of human behavior. And perhaps, in understanding them, we don't just learn how to see through deception. We learn a bit more about ourselves, our own hesitations, our own illusions. Are you ready to see beyond the mask? Let's dive in. 1. Laughing off serious topics. Have you ever tried to bring up something meaningful with someone, only to have them laugh it off like it's nothing? I know I have, and it's frustrating. At first it might seem like they're just trying to keep things light-hearted or avoid making the conversation too serious. But over time, you start to realize that this habit of laughing things off is more than just a quirky response. It's a way of dodging accountability. When someone brushes off serious issues with a chuckle or joke, they're not just avoiding the conversation, they're hiding from the truth. In one of my past relationships, I often felt disconnected, like we were slowly drifting apart. I'd try to bring it up, hoping we could talk it through, but every time I'd get that same awkward chuckle and a dismissive, "Oh, you're just overthinking it. Relax." At first, I let it slide. I convinced myself maybe I was being too intense. Or maybe they were just uncomfortable with these kinds of talks. But the truth was, their laughter wasn't about me or even about keeping things light. It was a shield against having to confront deeper issues. Here's the thing. Using humor to dodge serious topics isn't innocent. It shuts down the conversation, making it impossible to address the root problem. We're conditioned to think laughter is always a good thing, but when it's used to deflect, it creates a barrier to real communication. The more I allowed this to happen, the harder it became to feel connected. It's like a roadblock went up every time I tried to approach the truth, keeping us stuck in surface-level interactions. The deeper issue here is about emotional maturity. If someone can't talk about serious topics without trying to make a joke out of it, they're signaling that they're not ready or willing to be vulnerable or accountable. And that's a big problem. Real relationships need honest conversations, even if they're uncomfortable. If they laugh things off, don't let it slide. Ask, "Why is this funny to you?" Or, "Can we talk about this seriously?" Because humor shouldn't be a wall between you and the truth. When people avoid real talk, it's not just a small issue. It's a barrier to genuine connection, and that's something no relationship can survive. 2. Micro-expressions of guilt or fear. I used to think I was good at spotting lies until I learned about micro-expressions. These tiny, almost imperceptible facial expressions can reveal emotions like guilt or fear, no matter how hard someone tries to hide them. Think about it. A slight twitch in their brow, a flicker of discomfort in their eyes, or even a quick tightening of their lips. We don't usually notice these things, but once I started paying attention, I realized how much people's faces can give away. For example, I once had a friend who was late for a meetup. When I casually asked why, they shrugged it off with some vague excuse. But there was a fleeting look of panic, just for a second. It was so brief, but it was there. My gut told me something was off, but I brushed it aside. Later, I found out they'd actually been lying about where they were, and that quick micro-expression was a dead giveaway that I missed. Micro-expressions are fascinating because they're genuine. These aren't practiced, rehearsed responses. They're spontaneous reactions our bodies can't control, even when our minds are trying to be deceptive. Now, whenever I'm in a conversation and something feels off, I watch for these micro-expressions. They might only last a split second, but they're real indicators of hidden feelings. It's like seeing behind the mask for just a moment, catching a glimpse of what's actually going on. It sounds intense, but learning to notice micro-expressions has changed the way I interact with people. I no longer feel in the dark when something feels off. Instead, I trust my instincts and look for those subtle signs of guilt or fear. It's not about being paranoid, it's about being aware. We often talk about listening to words, but sometimes faces tell a much clearer story than anything else. So, if you're getting mixed signals from someone, pay close attention to those tiny changes in their expression. They might be giving you the truth they're not saying. 3. Body language. Body language can say more than words ever could, especially when it comes to honesty. I used to ignore subtle shifts in body language, thinking they were insignificant. But as I became more aware, I started noticing that people's actions often spoke louder than their words. One clear example: when someone's body is subtly turned away from you, even if they're engaged in conversation. I'll give you an example. I once had a friend who, whenever we discussed anything personal or uncomfortable, would slowly turn their body away. It was almost unconscious. At first, I thought I was reading into things, that maybe they just had a weird way of sitting. But the more it happened, the clearer it became. They'd shift away, crossing their arms or even looking around as if searching for an exit. Body language isn't accidental. When someone can't fully face you, it's often because they're hiding something or feeling uncomfortable with the conversation. It's almost as if their body is trying to physically escape the truth. And, just like with micro-expressions, these actions aren't calculated. They're raw, involuntary responses. When you notice someone's body turned away, especially during an important conversation, pay attention. It's a clue that something deeper might be going on. Over time, I've learned that if someone truly values honesty and connection, they'll face you directly, no matter how difficult the topic. They won't shy away or hide with their body. So if someone's angling away from you mid-conversation, it's not just bad posture. It's a subconscious sign that they're not entirely comfortable with the truth, and maybe they don't want you to see it either. 4. Changing the subject. Have you ever been in a conversation where you bring up a serious topic and suddenly the other person changes the subject? It's like a game of verbal dodgeball. You throw them a serious question and they instantly shift to something trivial. I used to think they were just scatterbrained or easily distracted, but now I know better. When someone frequently changes the subject during critical discussions, it's often because they're avoiding the truth. I experienced this firsthand in a past relationship. Every time I tried to discuss future plans, where we'd be in a year, our goals, even how we'd handle tough situations, the conversation would suddenly steer towards something totally unrelated, like dinner plans or a random funny story. I brushed it off at first, telling myself they were just uncomfortable with the topic, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. Changing the subject isn't just a harmless shift in conversation, it's a tactic to dodge uncomfortable truths. And what I learned was that if someone truly respects you, they'll stay with you in those hard conversations. They won't take an escape route to avoid the issues. Sure, these topics can be uncomfortable, but genuine relationships are built on facing them head-on, not steering away. If you notice this in someone, it's okay to gently bring them back to the original topic. It might feel awkward, but it's a way of keeping them accountable. And if they continue to change the subject, take it as a sign. It's not about making them uncomfortable. It's about knowing that truth requires presence. Real conversations don't hide in the safety of unrelated topics. They're about facing what matters, even when it's tough. 5. Excessive justifications. One thing I've noticed about people who are hiding something is that they often feel the need to over-explain. Rather than giving a simple answer, they pile on details, making their story sound like they're trying a little too hard to be believable. I used to think that extra detail was a sign of openness, but over time, I realized it can actually be a sign of deceit. Imagine asking someone a simple question like, "Why were you late?" And instead of a quick response, you get a long, drawn-out explanation. They start talking about every single red light, the traffic they hit, the exact sequence of events that led to them being late. It's like they're building a wall of words to cover something up. Now, I'm not saying everyone who over-explains is lying, but when explanations feel overly polished and rehearsed, it's worth paying attention. I once had a friend who did this constantly. Every time I asked them something small, they'd go into a monologue of justifications. At first, I thought they were just detail-oriented, but after a while, I started wondering why they felt the need to justify everything so thoroughly. It turned out they were hiding other things, using these justifications as a smokescreen to avoid suspicion. If you find someone excessively justifying their actions, ask yourself why. Honesty usually doesn't need a lot of padding. A straightforward answer is often enough. So if someone gives you an overly elaborate story, consider that it might be covering something up. Sometimes, the more people explain, the less they're actually telling you. Trust your gut on this one. 6. Vagueness when pressed for specifics. Nothing is more frustrating than trying to get a clear answer from someone who's being intentionally vague. You ask a direct question, expecting a straightforward answer, and instead you get something like, "Oh, things are moving along," or "We're in the early stages." It's like they're throwing words at you without giving you any real information. I used to think it was just their way of avoiding the question, But now I know that vagueness often points to something deeper. One time, I had a coworker who loved talking about all the big projects they were working on, but whenever I'd ask for specifics, what companies they were collaborating with, the status of the project, they'd respond with these vague, almost poetic descriptions. No names, no facts, just a lot of empty words. Eventually, I found out that many of these projects were either stalled or completely fabricated. They relied on vague language to keep people from pressing further. Vagueness, I've learned, is a shield. People use it to avoid accountability because it's easier to backpedal on a vague statement than on a concrete detail. If someone truly has nothing to hide, they won't mind giving you specifics. So if you notice someone dodging details, take it as a sign. Ask a few follow-up questions, and if they keep dancing around the answer, there's likely a reason for it. Vagueness can seem harmless, but it's often a telltale sign of something being hidden. 7. Inconsistent stories. One of the easiest ways to spot a lie is by paying attention to inconsistencies in someone's story. If someone is telling the truth, their story usually stays the same, even when repeated. But when someone's lying, they tend to forget details or change parts of their story without realizing it. I've learned to notice these small changes because they often signal something bigger. Once, a friend told me about an amazing job offer they received, with all the perks and benefits. But the next time they brought it up, a few details had shifted. They mentioned a different job title, a new location, and even changed who had interviewed them. These were minor discrepancies, but they added up, making me question the entire story. Eventually, I found out they'd exaggerated parts of the offer, trying to make it sound better than it actually was. Inconsistent stories are like loose threads. Pull on them, and the whole thing starts to unravel. When you notice these discrepancies, don't ignore them. Ask for clarification and see if the story holds up. People who are telling the truth usually don't mind repeating themselves or correcting small details. But a liar's story is often inconsistent because they're trying to keep track of too many falsehoods. Consistency is a hallmark of honesty, so trust your instincts when things don't add up. 8. Defensiveness. Have you ever asked someone a simple question and been met with an over-the-top defensive reaction? I have, and it's almost always a sign that something's wrong. Defensiveness can be a natural response to criticism, but when it's an extreme reaction to a harmless question, it often means the person is hiding something. In college, I worked on a group project with someone who would react defensively every time I asked for an update. Even a casual, "How's it going with the report?" would set them off, accusing me of micromanaging or not trusting them. At first, I brushed it off, thinking maybe they just didn't like being managed. But over time, I realized that their defensiveness was actually a sign of guilt. They hadn't been doing their part of the project and were trying to cover it up. People who are being honest don't usually feel the need to defend themselves so aggressively. They're calm, straightforward, and open. On the other hand, someone with something to hide will go into overdrive, turning the tables to make you feel like you're the one being intrusive. If you encounter this type of defensiveness, don't back down. Take it as a cue to look closer because, more often than not, it's a sign that something's being hidden. 9. Not listening. Listening is a basic part of communication, but many people don't truly listen. They're just waiting for their turn to speak. This isn't just a conversational faux pas. It can actually be a sign of deception. When someone's lying or hiding something, they often can't fully engage because they're preoccupied with managing their own narrative. I used to know someone who would nod and smile during conversations, but rarely responded in a way that made me feel heard. Whenever I'd ask them something important or try to discuss an issue, they'd give quick, shallow responses or change the topic entirely. At first I thought it was just their personality, but eventually I realized they were hiding things, using this lack of engagement as a way to avoid going deeper. Not listening isn't just disrespectful, it's a red flag. If someone truly values you and is being honest, they'll be engaged in the conversation, actively listening and responding meaningfully. But when they're checked out or only half listening, it's often because they're more focused on what they're hiding than on the actual discussion. Trust your intuition when someone isn't fully present. It's a clue that something might be off. 10. Over-polished details. One of the biggest red flags I've learned to watch for is when someone's story sounds too perfect. Real life is messy and unpredictable. It rarely follows a flawless script. When someone's story is packed with overly polished details, it can be a sign that they've rehearsed it, constructing a perfect narrative to avoid suspicion. I once knew someone who loved telling stories that sounded like they were straight out of a movie. Everything was dramatic and timed to perfection, with every detail perfectly placed. They'd recount scenes with cinematic clarity, down to the exact time, weather, and background noise. I loved the stories at first, but then I started wondering how they could remember everything so perfectly. Eventually, I found out they had exaggerated many parts, crafting these stories to sound more impressive. Over-polished stories can be captivating, but they're often too good to be true. Real memories are rarely flawless. They're filled with small imperfections. So if someone's story sounds like it was rehearsed for the big screen, take a step back. Ask a few clarifying questions and see how they respond. If the details start to unravel, it's likely that they're not being entirely truthful. People who have nothing to hide don't need their stories to be perfect. They just need them to be real. And so, we arrive at the end of this little exploration, our journey through the mysterious terrain of truth and deception. It's fascinating, isn't it? The subtle signs, the nuanced gestures, the half-hidden glances, all small ripples on the surface of a vast, complex human experience. Perhaps now you see that detecting a lie isn't about seeking to expose others or holding ourselves above them. Rather, it's about cultivating awareness, about learning to tune into the delicate dance of honesty and concealment that we all, in our own ways, participate in. In understanding these signs, you're not just learning how to spot a lie, you're inviting yourself to look more deeply, to be more present with others and, most importantly, with yourself. For isn't it true that the more we seek honesty in others, the more we must embrace it within ourselves? The masks we wear, the illusions we cling to, they're not just out there in the world of others. They're within us as well, woven into our own habits and fears. So, I encourage you to reflect. What have you seen in yourself and others that hints at a concealed truth? Where have you observed these small ripples, these delicate signs that speak louder than words? And what, if anything, will you do differently now that you know? Please share your thoughts. I'd love to know what you've discovered, what insights have arisen as we've delved into this strange and wonderful topic together. After all, understanding is something we build together. So, let's keep the conversation going and see where it leads. You know, I've been thinking about how sometimes saying less speaks louder. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. Whoever talks a lot often fails, they say, and lately, I think I'm starting to understand why. This realization didn't come suddenly. It crept up on me, like a thought that doesn't want to be ignored. I'm sitting here, cup of warm tea in hand, and thinking back to all those times when, in a rush to fill the silence, I just kept talking. I thought if I said more, it would make things clearer, but it often did the opposite. Let me tell you about one of those moments. A few years back, I was catching up with an old friend. We hadn't seen each other in years, and I was eager to fill him in on everything. My work, my travels, all these stories that felt important to share. I was so caught up in my own narrative that I didn't even notice how quiet he had gotten. I just kept going, thinking I was making this fantastic conversation. And then he interrupted me, kind of hesitantly, and he said, "I really wanted to tell you something." It turns out he was going through something heavy, something that I'd missed entirely in my monologue. He needed someone to listen, and here I was, just filling the air with my own stories. I remember the way his face looked, the slight disappointment. I'd failed to be the friend he needed. And you know, that look stayed with me, longer than I'd like to admit. From then on, I started to notice this pattern in myself. The more I spoke, the more I missed out on what others were actually trying to say. Or maybe what they were not saying, but were hoping I'd notice. And as I started paying attention to this, I saw it everywhere. Not just in my conversations, but in others too. It's like we're all afraid of the quiet moments, like we have to fill them up with words, no matter if they're necessary or not. But here's the thing. In silence, something special happens. There's space. Space for thoughts to breathe, for feelings to surface, for meaning to reveal itself. The times when I finally chose to stop talking, just let the words settle. I began to understand things I couldn't see when I was busy trying to be heard. I heard myself more clearly, and I started to really hear other people. I had another moment like this with my son recently. He was telling me about his day, about a challenge he'd faced, and I could feel that familiar urge to jump in, offer advice, tell him what I thought he should do, but I caught myself just for a moment. I held back. I let him talk, let him feel the silence after he spoke, and in that silence he found his own answers. It was one of the most powerful experiences I've had as a parent, to just let him have his own space, to listen and let him hear his own voice. Looking back, I realize how much richer my life would be if I had chosen silence more often, especially when I thought I had all the right words. Speaking less taught me so much more about the people around me, about what they needed, about how they felt, and even about myself. Because when we stop talking, we give ourselves permission to listen, not just to others, but to what's happening within us. It's funny how we often talk ourselves in circles, trying to fill up gaps, trying to make sense of things out loud, when sometimes all we need is to sit with our thoughts, let them settle, to be present in a way that goes beyond words. And I'm not saying I've got this down perfectly. I'm still learning. But I've come to believe that words are powerful only when they're given the space to mean something. So, if there's one thing I'd share with you, sitting here with my cup of tea and my reflections, it's this. Don't be afraid of the quiet. Sometimes, in the moments when you hold back, you'll hear things that were there all along, words you didn't have to say, answers you didn't have to search for, and you'll find a kind of peace in that silence, a connection that runs deeper than words. So next time you find yourself in a conversation, take a breath, pause, and listen. You might just find that less is indeed more. Thank you for joining us today on Ancient Wisdom. If you found value in these timeless teachings, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe for more insights from the ages. Stay wise and see you in the next one.